Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Those Eyes of Mine. The machine beeped, boiled and seethed. I pressed the button, and water leaked, filling the cup to its brim. A cup of coffee, pure. I opened the window wide, letting the breeze tingle the fuzz on my nape. Sat beneath it, picked up the cigarette from the ashtray that had burned lonely for so long that the ash stretched from its tip almost to the cotton, forming a bridge undisturbed by its weight. I shook it off and pulled on it. The taste of burned butt dominated the tobacco tang. The coffee cleansed it. Drops from the drizzle intruded on my domicile, enhancing the soothing effect of the wind on the dots they marred. The sun had tucked tail and crept behind clouds. Rest, the doctor had prescribed. Nerves, stretched thin, throbbed in harmony with the rain. Oh, the rain. How could I, Doc? The weather called my name. I donned my shoes and jacket, closed the door, strode down the stairs to the streets. The slabs of cement towered over, reaching for the skies. The drops welcomed me, painting me gently. A ball snuck in, got trapped between my eyes and glasses, while the rest rained down like arrows on a battlefield. People buzzed up and around, busy little bees. Yet, however or whomever I tried to peek at, all that I managed to see was but a blur, mangled by the shower, by the rain, by its tears. They paved a path for themselves, dug ruts on my glasses. My vision failed to pierce. I trailed what I assumed to be their tracks. When one's feet made space for themselves on the puddles as they stepped and left it vacant when they departed, that's when the ensuing spot got filled with water. It created a momentary footstep. That's what I followed. A fleeting moment along the restless ponds, vibrating in seclusion from one another. The vista of concrete proved inescapable. For the moment, the puddles were left undisturbed. That's what they showed. A reflection of gray. Hubs of broken dreams. The vehicles behaved strangely under the rain. They too beeped, stalled, and buzzed around. The path led me along the blocks, passing from one street to the other. The vistas remained the same. Were they copies of one another? Or was I stuck in place? I lifted my head and flicked the flock of drops off my locks. That was the third bus stop that I approached. The carrier reloaded, its travelers hurrying outside with new ones coming on board. To avoid the crowd, I lingered in my gait, pulled out my pack, and plucked a treat. The way it nested on my lips brought a moment of respite. The lighter struggled, producing sparks, again and again. Yet no flame. The rain dampened both. The bus drove off. I continued my journey with no obstacles in sight, threading the many tracks left behind. "Need a light?" a question asked from beneath the canopy of the stop. The mess on my glasses had turned to a layer, a coat of mist, a mush of hair, clothes, legs, and arms, and a lighter lit with a gray-washed flame. I crouched, touched the light, and tasted the smoke, pulled my head back into the rain. "What? You'll just leave?" The tender voice continued, anchoring me on the dock. I pondered. Was one cigarette enough? No. I towed 2 butts out of their home and returned the gesture. My glasses slid as I crouched, parked on the peaking bone of my nose. The clouds had slid too, allowing the sun to shoot its beams on the glass walls of the bus stop. Their pallid reflection blinded me, but I felt the pack lighten. The person lagged, suggesting hesitation. Disturbed by the sudden change in the weather, I looked back at the sun, but it was no more. Thicker clouds had settled in. The rain was picking up heat. Don't miss the next one. If you wish to avoid the deluge, that is, I said, stowing the pack into my pocket. The hymning tone concealed a plea behind my ear, maybe one of attention or of interaction. Entertaining these ideas had brought me here, so I failed to see a reason for another attempt. My surroundings grew tired, a waterlogged world crying in its stead. Steps continued. The rain poured. The worse it got, the fewer people brooded. How did I end up here, I wondered, amid this city, amid the crosses of colorless walls, and amid the faceless people? How far had I wandered? How long it had been? I swerved on the road, heading towards the park. An island with different scenery. Or so I thought. The rain had dug its claws here too, washing away all that would help me recall what was. Think of what could have been. Instead, I was forced to watch what is in another gray landscape. The sky's tears battled with the leaves. The branches swung at one another. Fierce battles ensued. The road continued straight up to a fountain, where it diverged and transformed into a circle, and restoring itself back into a straight line, it continued. I sat near the formation, for the trees obeyed the road, and the sky, with its gray clouds, remained visible, and the battles fought turned into echoes from afar. The rain poured, thickening the layering clog on my glasses, changing it with another, never letting them rest. Down it poured. My cigarette had long been extinguished. yet the respite it brought remained all the same. And so, I kept sucking on the wet cotton. Lost, I dabbled with questions I knew I shouldn't ask. A man's worst enemy was his own mind. I had hoped for the rain to wash away the colors of my brain too. But they remained, blinking ever so often, showing me what was. My clothes heavy, burdened with the rain, pulled me down on the bench. My hair too, wet, as if splashed on my scalp. I bit the butt with my teeth and looked above, to the soaring skies. My eyes were protected, so I didn't flinch. Instead, I enjoyed the moment of rain, enjoyed the moment of solitude, the moment of respite. The rivers ran, the fountain spat, and the clouds rumbled. I remained. For how long could I remain? For how long would I? My legs pulled in pain, and noise had settled at the bottom of my feet, a numbing pump. My head ached. I pulled on my dimmed cigarette. In this park, I had hoped to encounter a spark of life. The leaves were falling, the branches were breaking from the wind, and my ankles drowned beneath the rivers. The pouring rain consumed. Hungry, it ate everything. But the pain, my teeth failed to cling on. My mouth gapped. I dropped my companion. It soaked, increased in weight, and sank. What was another lost cigarette in the rinsing sea? Seeking fair lady. No matter how much she fussed with her blonde locks, Lady Charity Farnsworth cast a blue, deviled countenance before her boudoir mirror, so could not achieve a desirable outcome. She finally relinquished the brush, tossing it to the makeup-strewn vanity as she thought to herself, "Whatever am I to do?" My father has forbidden me to ever entertain my beau, Sir Riley, in any genteel ton company henceforth. He doesn't understand the depths of our love for one another. What is the point of attending yet another tea or ball in pretense of making a match, when in my heart of hearts, the perfect match already exists? There is none other I would ever want to be yoked to. Why can't Father forgive our innocent indiscretions in the garden and offer Sir Fenwick another opportunity to win his graces? So what if he saw us kissing? Giving up, she flung her arms out wide, then buried her face in her hands as she sobbed. Presently, a cautious knock sounded at the door. "Oh, Charity, dear," came the voice of her father. "Let me in to see how you look. You'll be meeting some exciting, eligible bachelors tonight. You must be ready. It is time to be going." "Oh, one moment, please. Be right there." She slipped a silky robe over her shift and opened the door. "Charity, where is your maid? You are not near ready to go, and your face is a disgrace. Whatever is wrong with you?" She couldn't help herself. She encircled his neck with her forearms. and cried on the shoulder of his wool spencer, smearing it with rouge. Please, Father, I have no desire to meet any other man. I only yearn for my true love. Do you mean that insufferable rogue, Fenwick? He treated you like an adventuress. No respect for you or myself. I will not be bamboozled by the likes of him. You deserve a man of honor, the kind that will be at the gala tonight. Now get into your gown. As long as you are under my roof, you'll abide by my rules. I'll pick out a suitable mate for you, one that will be an advantageous coupling. End of discussion. He disentangled himself from her and slammed the door shut on his way out. 1 second later, the door opened again as he stuck his head in. Don't bother getting dressed now. We would be late. I'll simply bring home some lucky fellow with me. You'll meet him when I get back, and we will have a ceremony this weekend to make you his wife. That'll put an end to your nonsense. Once he left, Charity wailed louder than ever. No, no, no. He can't do this to me. She collapsed on the bed in tears. Meanwhile, out in the garden, Sir Riley crouched behind a leafy rhododendron, watching for the carriage to leave. It surprised him to see Lord Farnsworth was alone. That meant chances were good that Charity would be alone inside as well. He had ridden along with his partner, Sir Carlton Winslow, when he came to escort Dowager Countess Diana Honeyfield, Charity's aunt, out to dinner. His hope had been to follow Charity and her father to whatever event they had planned for the evening and try to win an audience with the Lord to apologize for his behavior at their last meeting. This turn of events was even better. Dare he approach his fair maiden to pick up where they left off? He had gained great strides in having his way with the lass before her father had discovered their secret rendezvous in the dark garden and forbade them to see each other ever again. It was a risky plan, but with aplomb, perhaps fortune would smile on them, and her father could never deny them, given the right circumstance. His heart was pounding. If he could just get inside and convince the fair maiden to let him come inside also. His hands sweated as he hoisted himself up the giant oak that spread branches out toward what he was sure was her dressing room window. Twigs snapped and leaves rustled. Hopefully, no servants were close enough to hear his clumsy ascent. When in position, he could peer through the gauzy curtains and see her sprawled on the bed, wearing little other than a flimsy robe. His excitement heightened. He threw twigs to ping on the glass and cautiously called out her name. What was that noise? I miss Riley so much. It is as if I can hear him calling to me. She stretched up from the mattress, allowing the robe to fall away, exposing more tender flesh. Then she realized where the noise was coming from and ran to the window. She couldn't get it opened fast enough when she saw her love clinging to the branches. Soon he was within her grasp, and they clung to each other. Mouths searched and found one another. Fingers fumbled at clothing till it fell away. Palms grabbed and caressed and repeated and explored uncharted territory. He picked up her trembling body and carried it to the bed, gently placing it as he wordlessly asked permission to envelope her. She willingly granted access and likewise enveloped all of him. They brought each other to tottering heights, crashing deliciously down, and climbed again and again, becoming one with each other. Let no man put asunder, losing all sense of time and space. They belonged to each other. They were in total bliss until Charity. It is your father. I have someone you need to meet. He will soon be your husband. I am giving him your hand in marriage. Come out at once. Charity wilted in Riley's arms. You mustn't be caught in here. He'll kill you. Then he'll kill me, slowly. I know the kind of man he would choose for me. Nothing like you. Climb out, please, she whispered. I'll not give you to another man. I'll face those barking irons if I must. But you belong fully to me now. We've been caught red-handed, but we've done nothing wrong. No apologies anymore. I'll make you an honest woman. We'll visit the Amen curler tomorrow. We love each other. Your father has to see that now. No swell will have you after tonight. I'm not sorry. He kissed her quickly and slid out the window just as her father opened the door on her nakedness beneath the sheets. 1600, November 28, 2024. Subterfuge. Suitors precariously climbing trees and pressing their suit. Ripped bodices. Hot kisses. Near discovery. I nearly swooned. What more could possibly befall our hero and heroine? Be still, my heart, and wait impatiently for the next installment of All's Fair. 1640, November 28, 2024. So glad you approve. Thought about changing ending to where she climbs out with him and they disappear too? Haven't entered it, so think it is okay to change. Happy Thanksgiving. Reply. Edit. Delete. Upvote. Downvote. 1 point. Trudy Jass. 1656. November 28, 2024. Happy Thanksgiving to you. You could have her slip out before she meets what's his name, or in the day or two before the wedding. Auntie could have a little tea party for her, and off the Jersey or Gretna Green they go. Reply. Report. Upvote. Downvote. 1 point. Mary Bendixson. 2055. Nov 28, 2024. Right on. Reply. Edit. Delete. 36. Nov 28, 2024. Your story has a lot going for it. It's dramatic, emotional, and packed with tension, all of which make for an engaging Regency romance. Charity's despair and her father's overbearing nature are written in a way that makes the stakes feel real. It's clear how much is on the line for her, and that emotional pull keeps the reader invested. I love how you've woven in Regency-era details like Spencer, Ton, and Almond Curler. Those touches make the world feel authentic as without being overwhelming. Charity and Riley's relationship feels passio. Reply. Report. 1644. Novi 28, 2024. So appreciative of your comments. Was considering changing the ending to her climbing out with him to the unknown. What do you think? Happy Thanksgiving. Reply. Edit. Delete. Upvote. Downvote. 1 point. Rebecca Lewis, 1808, Nov 29, 2024. Happy Thanksgiving to you as well. I think having Charity climb out with Riley could be a powerful ending. It adds an extra layer of defiance and agency to her character. It would show she's willing to take control of her own fate instead of being trapped by her father's demands. Plus, it leaves the story on a romantic and adventurous note, with the two of them facing an uncertain future together. That kind of ending would feel satisfying and true to the passion you've established between them. If you decide to go that route, you might want reply. Report. Thanks again. I wrote another too cute episode last night that sort of fits one of this week's prompts. After reading the new prompts, I think I will pull the fair story and match it with a new prompt. Even though it has several likes, which I will lose, I didn't enter it into contest, so it should be okay to do. Have more family events today, but hope to get this done. Reply. Edit. Delete. Upvote. Downvote. 1 point. Leslie Mamala, 1105. Nov 28, 2024. Well done. I am ready to hear what happens next. Reply. Report. Upvote. Downvote. 1 point. Mary Bendixson, 1653. Nov 28, 2024. Glad you liked it. And thanks for the follow. Have you read the previous episodes, all with fair in them, that lead up to this fiasco? We'll get back to your work after today. Happy Thanksgiving. Reply. Edit. Delete. 2020. Nov 28, 2024. Not yet, but I will. Happy Thanksgiving. Reply. Report. Upvote. Downvote. 1 point. Thomas. Wetzel, so 749. Nov 28, 2024. Your writing is so sophisticated, I can barely understand half of it. I just know it's awesome. You are so good. I'm gonna go watch every episode of Downton Abbey, and then come back to reread this and see if I can actually appreciate it like an intelligent adult. Happy Turkey Day. Reply. Report 1649. Novi 28, 2024. Gobble, gobble to you too. I don't know about sophisticated. I am only winging it on this ton stream, but glad you like it. Reply. Edit. Delete. Upvote. Downvote. 1 point. Lady Coretta. Stevenberg. 0502. Nov 28, 2024. Always a good read. Reply. Report. Joe 533. Nov 28, 2024. Thank you. Reply. Edit. Delete. Upvote. Downvote. 1 point. Alexis Araneta. 1748. Nov 27, 2024. An adorable continuation of your series. Lovely work. Reply. Report 1931. Novi 27, 2024. Thank you. Do you think of this as the finale, or does it go on? Reply. Edit. Delete. Ambition. Arms up, the man said. A smile touched my lips, and I did as I was told. I knew that I'd fucked up. There was no denying it. This meeting was a formality, not a death sentence. I lifted my arms lightly above my head. My suit coat hung along my shoulders like torn back sails. The man patted me down, unholstered my gun, and tucked it along the back of his waistband, and I looked at him with a questioning glance. The nerve of this one, I thought, but remained silent, smelling the wafting cigar smoke pouring out of Father's office. You'll get it back when business is concluded. This your only piece? He asked, sizing me up. I nodded and tucked in my shirt along the waist again, shimmied my pants into a better position. The man stood aside, gesturing for me to enter. My hand wrapped around the brass doorknob, and the thick wood creaked inward, and all at once the smell of Father's cigars hit me harder than a ton of bricks. My eyes broadened. Making my way inside through the haze reminded me of the night we went down to the docks to pitch the body of Lenny Chesnetter over into the dark water. Not me, Lenny's voice echoed in my mind. I didn't do nothing. I swear it. Nothin', I tell ya. The gunshot always sounds louder when it isn't you pulling the trigger. I entered the lavish office, my father sitting behind his desk like an old king at his throne. And to the chair along the right of the desk, my brother, turning his head to look at me. Even for all the years since the day of his automobile accident, I can never get used to the sight of that scar. A jagged line running along the left temple toward the middle of the cheek. Have a seat, Father said. I listened to my shoes clacking across the hardwood, listening to the sounds of the door shutting behind me, but didn't have to look back to know that the man outside had done it. Other scents were mingling in the air, Father's cologne, as well as my brother's. One of the housekeepers had set up a bouquet in this dark room, as if it had seemed to mask the constantly wafting cigar smoke drifting up toward the ceiling. It didn't. I found the open chair, to my father's right diagonal, from his spot behind the desk, and took the wide way around, pulling the chair back so that the three of us now sat almost in a perfect triangle. I did this because whatever bad water had been spilled between my brother and me, I wasn't in a fighting mood. Maybe it was the Irish in me, some instinctual thing to wanna fuck strange women and fight all the goddamn time. My brother scoffed at this, gusting his air, and flapped his coat back to the center of his torso, over the velvet blue vest beneath. A single gold chain clipped to one of the buttonholes, the same pocket watch I gave him for Christmas 2 winters ago. I sat with ease and crossed my right leg over the other. "Let's get down to it, boys," Father said. "Which one of you did it?" There was silence for a moment. My brother and I exchanged a glance, not saying a word. "All right, if that's how you want to do it," he said, pulling back one of the desk drawers and withdrawing a Colt 1911 .45 semi-automatic pistol. He thumbed back the hammer and pointed at me. "Which one of you sons of bitches killed Jimmy Booker?" "Oh, you think I fucking did it, do ya?" I asked with a sneer. "Go on then, shoot me. Get it over with," I said, resting my hands along the armrests. In truth, I didn't give a shit one way or the other. I looked over at my brother, trying to read his expression, but he sat there with a calm that I'd only ever seen a few times before. For once, I was the loose cannon here. For once, I was the one losing my mouth, when what I needed to do was shut the fuck up. "Why don't you point the gun there?" I said, pointing at my brother. "He's always the one stirring up problems in this family. Put one right between his fucking eyes and let's get this thing over with." The sound of the gunshot was deafening. I flinched at the recoil and, to my amazement, realized that I'd still been alive. My eyes widened as a smile crept onto my face. I looked at Father. The gun had been pointed upward, and the muzzle drifted a thin line of smoke from the barrel up to the ceiling, where it mixed with the wafting cigar smoke. "Are you fucking crazy?" I asked, sitting forward. My foot dropped to the hardwood floor with a thud. "You know how many coppers walk these streets?" I asked, squinting at him. "I own the cops," Father said with a smile, and set the gun down atop the desk there, where it sat pointing between both of us, and not at one of us in particular. Father picked up his cigar and gently rounded the ash from the lit end, brought it to his lips where he bit down lightly, perching it along the corner of his teeth. "I'm gonna ask you both again. Which one of you did it?" he asked, drawing on the chewed bit of his cigar, with a wash of gray smoke drifting down from his parted lips. His wrinkled eyes studied us one by one. "Does it matter?" my brother chimed in. "That guy was a crook. Bookie or not, he's been stealing from us For years, not us, he said. From me. And I know that he's been doing it. But what both of you don't know is that Jimmy Booker has been fixing bets for the better part of the last 2 decades. It was only a matter of time before we took the hammers to his kneecaps. But I would have let him live. You smug prick. Father leaned forward and stared at brother. Scraps. That's what he took from me. Scraps. Like a dog. And one of you 2 numbskulls whacked him before I could set him down and get the truth out of him good and proper. Father sat back. Besides, nobody gets snuffed out in this town without my saying so. Not even my dumb fuck petulant rat children prancing around like they're doing the Lord's work. Is that what you thought you were doing? The Lord's work? He slammed his fist down along the top of the wooden desk, killing a man in broad daylight. 2 days before the race of the fucking century. He stood quickly, the chair behind him falling back as he towered over the desk in front of us. Do you 2 idiots have any idea how much fucking money I was going to make off of that race? 55 large, I said. I knew I'd seen the books. How much money did you take him for, anyway? Father asked, pressing his knuckles down along the top of the desk. How much money did you recover from Jimmy's safe? All of it, I said. How much? He asked again. His pupils were so large that you couldn't see the blues there anymore. Only the blackened coals for eyes where color had once been. We're wasting time, my brother said absently. He had begun running his fingers along the scar across the left temple beside his eye. He did this, of course, an old gambling tell of his, when he bluffed. We had another bookie lined up, south side, Giovanni's man. My father was stunned into silence. He turned and picked up his expensive leather chair and set it upright once more, collapsing into it. Let me get this straight. You killed my man so that you could use the Italians. Do you think because we have some truce with those Goombas, you can take out one of our own and fix bets with another organization? Looks like you boys are trying to run this family. Father rubbed his eyes, his cigar still perched in his teeth along the corner of his mouth. He breathed in deep, the cigar cherry lighting up the inside of his palm, and he pulled it from his lips, curling an index finger around it, wet and gnarled. His hand perched along the armrest, a thick line of smoke wafting from the end of the half-chewed cigar. You boys will be the death of me, he said with his eyes closed. He turned to look first at my brother and then at me. What gave you smartasses the bright idea to fix bets with the Italians? My brother glanced at me and then back to Father. Because it's our time to move on their territory. The Italians are weak. They lost 3 good men to bank robberies, another 2 to the bombing last month. My father's eyes glinted. Between the 3 of us, none of us saying the thing there beneath the surface. That father had been orchestrating the bombings. There had been dozens in the months past. He'd been killing off the Italians from whatever shadows that he'd been operating in, beneath the guise of a truce all this time. The bombs that had been planted, the coppers tipped off about the bank robberies, was only a fraction of the work that had been done. Explosives were planted in engine rooms, aboard steamers, docked in Boston Harbor. Prized fighters dying suddenly from arsenic. There was a level of depravity not spoken of within this room, and between the 3 of us, nobody had said a word. "Why, Jimmy?" Father asked. "Why in all of this did you take out my very own fucking bookie?" I sat forward, an elbow cocked behind me along the armrest. Because Jimmy wasn't who you thought he was. I stared across the desk. My brother shifted beside me. Jimmy wasn't just fixing bets for you. He was fixing them for the Italians at the same time. He might have been taking crumbs from you over the years, but he's been raking it in hand over fist with the Italians for a decade or more. Jimmy is a distant cousin to the Giovanni Syndicate, married to one of our very own. "How do you know all this?" Father asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're not the only one who bribes cops," Brother said. There was laughter then. Father sat back against the leather chair and stared for a time at the ceiling, running his thick fingers through his thinning red hair. Word on the street is Jimmy's been letting bits and pieces of information slip past our lines for years. How do you think the Italians were able to take the South Side so quickly? Father, puzzled by this, shook his head and sat up once more. He centered himself behind the desk and laced his fingers. He seemed to know without knowing. "What do you suppose we do about all of this?" he asked, looking at me. I looked at my brother, who finally smiled. "We know the name of their horse," Brother said. "Consider it a parting gift from Jimmy." The next day had been one of the fairer ones of the season, almost pleasant. The sun was shining brilliantly overhead. I squinted through my tinted glasses, my cap tucked low over the eyes. I stood in the open air, smelling the vibrant scents of the women in attendance all around, their floral dresses puffed beneath the small of their waists like delicate flowers, concealing something even sweeter there beneath. My eyes moved across the sea of faces there, the onlookers waiting for the next race to begin, and with the gunshot that rang out, a few around were startled. But the next round of horses were padding down the track. Our horse wasn't among them, but was the next to follow. So I had little interest in this race, except for the equestrian appeal of horses galloping along their curved track with each of their jockeys whipping their hindquarters in feverish gait. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. The leader among them, a tan beauty with a red-jacketed jockey standing above and hunched over the bobbing head of the horse that he rode. They crossed the finish line, the crowd erupting into feverish applause. "Ours is next," my brother said beside me. All was taken care of. I needn't bother with going over the morning's events, as I'd known well into the mid-afternoon what had transpired. Giovanni now lay along a cold slab downtown, the mortician sifting through the gunshot wounds that had been inflicted by the Tommy guns that took out their entire entourage as they approached their prize-winning horse named Winn-Dixie. Our man inside had seen to poisoning Winn-Dixie with enough tranquilizers to kill a horse, to pun, but we'd be there to watch it as it happened. The horses had left the track, their riders collecting their wreaths of flowers before padding along the high walls to adoring and cheering fans. "You're certain it's been taken care of?" I asked, looking at him, my eyes trailing over the scar along the side of his face. "It's done," he said, without looking at me, feeling my eyes running along the course of that jagged line. I focused forward once more. "Father will be pleased," I said. There wasn't anything else to say. This was the first in many events moving forward. The decision that we were consciously making in a coup to take out our flesh and blood and run the organization the way that we saw fit. The world was moving right along beyond the cozy place that Father had built and remained. This was the world of the steam invention, industrialization, changing political landscapes, and even grander concepts that eluded Father. It seemed that in just an evening's pass, the world had left him there, a fossil amongst the living, and that no world would welcome his old ideals and aging perspective. I glanced at my brother now, not knowing how long he'd been staring at me. Both of us knew. "When this is all over, you'll take the north, and I'll take the south side," he said. I focused my attention on the track before us and nodded. I would take over my father's estate, and my brother would take control of the Italians. Boston was ours for the taking. There was a long pause between us, waiting for the next race to begin. A stir of excitement amongst the onlookers. And then the gunshot came. The gates opened. Our horse, Lil Red 1, roared past the others, but at the third gate, Winn-Dixie trotted forward in hopefulness, keeping a fair speed at first before arching its head backward and falling onto the ground with its back legs splayed as it rolled to its side, knocking its rider from its back. Everyone jumped to their feet and stood watching the downed rider, Winn-Dixie, writhing in pain, kicking its legs beneath it as it lay upon its side, bobbed its head as it scraped gently along the ground there. Everyone around murmuring with feverish anxiety. Winn-Dixie, panting, kicked its feet a few more times, stopped, heaved and let out the last of its breath. Lil Red 1 crossed the finish line in first place, without the other riders knowing what had happened. I glanced at my brother. The crook of a small smile touched his lips. I looked back to Winn-Dixie, forgetting all about our own prized horse winning the race, and stared with wide eyes in horror at the fallen stud with his rider knelt beside it. One small hand rested along the rib cage of the dead animal. "That settles it," Brother said. He turned to look at me, and I to him, finally, forcing my eyes from Winn-Dixie. "Pleasure doing business with you," he said, extending a hand. I shook it, feeling the embrace of my brother there amongst a crowded bandstand of race enthusiasts. For a moment, I felt the warmth of his hand, a subtle reminder of the man that he was, a handshake with someone that I loved, and then felt the cold and calculated business transaction that had just concluded. "Till we see each other again," I said. We parted there. He took his leave and mingled with the crowd beyond, making his way down the steps, rounded the corner, and was gone. That was the last time that I'd spoken to my brother aloud. Not long after the events of that day, my father had been fatally stabbed to death late one evening. Of course, this was part of the plan all along, though I had never been the one holding the knife. It was my brother, releasing us unto the splinters of this syndicate. It wasn't long before the fires started, as his men had been ordered to take out the Italians in force. The gunshots, for a time, had been frequent and unrelenting, often in broad daylight, but skirmishes clamored through the nights in those early days. Only rumors of these prominent Italian family members slain in cold blood, or that of the houses that had been burned in the early morning hours while they slept cozied in their beds. My brother is always the benefactor, or presumed to have been. As I sat in Father's study, swirling a brandy, I'd not had the slightest care. My brother, unbeknownst to him, had been working for me all along, doing the dirty work with blood-stained hands, as the plans that I'd set into motion had finally come to pass. "Cheers," I said, raising a toast. The shadows beneath, I always had an irrational fear of the dark. Not in the typical sense, where shadows seemed to slither and stretch out from the corners of my room at night, but in the more insidious way, where the darkness crept into my mind. It was a quiet terror, the feeling that something was watching, waiting for me to slip. But lately, that fear had intensified. I could no longer tell where the line between reality and nightmare began to blur. It started innocuously enough, strange dreams, vivid and unsettling. They were always the same. A vast, endless hallway with doors lining the walls, each leading to a room I had never seen. But the worst part was the figure at the end of the hall. It was always the same faceless shadow. A person, but not a person. Its form indistinguishable from the pitch-black night surrounding it. One night, it was different. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The hallway from my dream stretched out before me, just like in my sleep. Only now, it felt real. The floor was cold under my bare feet, the air heavy with the scent of mildew. I froze, knowing that something was wrong, but unable to move. My eyes darted around the familiar room that now felt alien. My instinct screamed at me to run. But where? To hide from what? Suddenly, a noise broke the silence. A creak from the far end of the hallway. The figure had moved closer. My breath hitched as I saw it again, standing at the far end, a dark silhouette against the backdrop of the hallway's dim glow. No matter how many times I tried to look away, the shape seemed to grow, inch by inch, its presence more overwhelming. I tried to scream, but no sound came. Panic surged as I tried to turn back to my room, but my legs wouldn't obey. Each step I took towards the hallway was heavier than the last, as if the darkness was pulling me in, urging me closer to the shadow. Then, for a split second, I saw its face, or rather, the absence of it. Where eyes should have been, there was only an empty, swirling void, a vortex of my worst memories. All the faces, all the fears I had ever tried to bury, resurfaced in that hollow, unblinking stare. In that moment, I understood. The figure wasn't some external terror. It was the manifestation of all the things I feared about myself. My fear was me. I was something that needed to be feared. But why? Why do I need to be afraid of myself? And then, in the middle of my terror, something shifted. I began to understand that the nightmare wasn't about running, hiding, or avoiding the figure. It was about confronting it, acknowledging what it represented. I had lived my life trying to hide myself, my true self, the real me. But the more I avoided, the more it controlled me. The shadow wasn't just a fear. It was a reflection of my own unresolved past that I needed to confront, or I needed to remember something that explained everything, explained why I was different. Taking a deep breath, I did the one thing I had never dared to do. I approached the figure. As I walked towards it, the air thickened, the darkness pressing in on all sides. But I kept going. The closer I got, the less the shadow seemed to loom. The face, or what should have been a face, began to soften, its edges blurring, until it was just a shadow once again, no more real than than the fears I had allowed to dominate my life. My heart still raced, but there was a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I had confronted the darkest part of myself and survived. And now I remembered. I remembered everything. The darkness around me began to recede, the hallway dissolving into nothing. I was back in my room, sitting up in bed, the morning light creeping in through the blinds. My breathing was steady now, my mind clear. For the first time in years, the shadows no longer seemed so terrifying, for I had conquered it. The only thing that ever got anything out of me, because now I knew. Now I remembered the truth. The truth about who I am, the monster that I carried within me. It didn't want to stay buried anymore. It was clawing through my skin to let loose. I had controlled it my whole life. It was time everyone felt what I felt. Everyone had to be afraid of my fear. Everyone deserved to face my fear. Everyone should fear me for who I am. I sat on the edge of my bed, the warmth of the morning sun pressing through the curtains. My mind still buzzed with the after effects of the nightmare. No, not a nightmare, I corrected myself, but a revelation. It wasn't something I could easily shake off. The fear of the dark, the shadow that had haunted me for so long, still lingered in the corners of my mind. But now there was something different, a strange sense of power, knowing the truth. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the world beyond. The trees swayed in the breeze, and the sky was clear, but a lingering thought gnawed at me. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a text from my best friend, Mia. "Hey, how are you today? You seemed off last night. Wanna talk?" Oh, so now she wants to talk, is it? With a deep breath, I typed a reply. "I had a strange dream last night. I think it was more than just a dream, though. Something shifted in me." Mia's reply came almost instantly. "That sounds intense. Want to meet up? You can tell me about it." I felt annoyed, but then I typed, "Let's meet at the cafe later." Mia was my best friend, but it always felt like she always only reached out when she wanted something. I had always been good at reading people. I knew Mia was selfish, but I always hanged out with her because she was also one of the most popular girls in college, which gave my life normalcy. I never understood any emotion. I just mimicked everything I saw. I always knew something was different about me, but today I knew why. As I prepared for the day, I couldn't shake the sense that something had changed within me. The shadow I had confronted might have vanished for now, but it had left a trace that was now pushing me to look deeper inside myself, to explore what was beneath the surface. Later that afternoon, I arrived at the cafe, Mia was already there, sipping a cappuccino and scanning her phone. She looked up when I entered, her face lighting up with a welcoming, fake smile. I was now sure that Mia needed something. The strength needed to suppress the urge to eye roll was tiring. Sometimes I wondered, why do I even bother? I took a seat across from her, the comforting hum of the cafe's atmosphere easing my nerves. I glanced around the cafe. It's strange, really, how people go on with their lives, oblivious to the fact that they're just players in a game I'm not really interested in. They feel things, emotions like guilt or joy or sadness. They let these things rule them. But not me. I don't let emotions get in the way. They're distractions. Why should I feel anything when I can see things so clearly? Take today, for example. I'm sitting across Mia at a cafe, and she's talking about her day. Something trivial, like how her boyfriend Cole was rude, or how her coffee wasn't as hot as she'd wanted it. I can see her eyes light up when she talks, how she leans in slightly, waiting for my response. She thinks I'm listening, that I care, but I don't. The words she's saying don't matter. The only thing that matters is how she behaves, how I react to things she says, how she trusts me, how she looks at me like I'm someone worth sharing her thoughts with. I give my just enough attention to keep her interested. That's all I need. I can tell what she's going to say next without even having to think about it. People are predictable. They are creatures of habit. Emotions are just their patterns, their responses to external stimuli. They don't make them special. They're just machines that respond to certain things, like I do. The difference is, I don't get tangled in those responses. They're useful, though. Understanding them, manipulating them, it's like a game of chess. You move them around until they do what you want. She said that we could talk about my dream. But here we are, talking about how awful of a boyfriend Cole is. I just hope she doesn't cry. Because today, I don't think I can put up with this anymore. Cole just yelled at her for not deleting an Instagram post he didn't like. He never understood her. She says it like it matters. The vulnerability in her voice, that little crack that betrays the illusion of control. It's almost amusing. People talk about their wounds like they're sacred, like they're somehow beyond reproach. But what they don't realize is that they're just vulnerabilities. And if you're smart, you can use them. I watch her carefully, noting the way her hand shakes slightly as she stirs her drink. She's nervous now, about something. I nod, pretending to care, like I'm reflecting on what she said. I don't care about her boyfriend or her pain. I care about what makes her tick, how I can twist her perceptions just enough to get what I want. It's not about hurting her, not necessarily. It's about control, power, and in this world, people give up their power so easily. They open up to you, they trust you, and once they do, they're mine. Her phone vibrates. She picks it up, looks at it first with anger, then confusion, then sadness. I don't need to wonder what it is about. She will tell me about it eventually. She always does. She smiles, reassured. She thinks I understand her, thinks I'm someone she can confide in. She's wrong. I finished my drink. Her face lit up with the self-satisfaction of someone who feels understood, who's shared their deepest secrets with someone they think cares. Do you have a crush on Cole? She asks suddenly, her expression a mixture of hurt and anger. Now, where was this coming from? Sometimes people do throw a curveball at you, but if you are someone like me, you always know how to dodge it. What? No, I said, trying to convey an emotion that I wasn't feeling. She stares at me, trying to read me. Unlike me, she wasn't good at reading people. Hence, she was in a relationship with an idiot like Cole. He was hot, all right. He had a handsome face, body that girls went mad over, and that bad boy attitude that had girls dropping like flies all over the campus. Also, he was nutty as a fruitcake. He had a personality of an Adidas sandal. She thinks that staring at me intently may intimidate me into telling her something. I just don't care about her or her pathetic boyfriend anymore. It seemed like a staring contest between us. She doesn't know that I've already moved on. I've already seen her for what she is. Predictable, simple, and just another piece on the board. I've won, and she hasn't even realized it. Cole and I had a fight yesterday. You know about the Instagram post I told you about? Then he went on saying about how smashing hot you are. Brad and Nate agreed with him. I got a little mad. I mean, I know you are hot, but please, why does he care when he is dating like the hottest girl on the campus? She said, looking at me to affirm her belief. I just stared back because I don't even care anymore. She just continued after a minute of reassuring herself about her hotness. Cole left after that, but Nate stayed back to see if I was all right. And then he said that Cole has been getting a little obsessed with you lately, ever since he came back from visiting his sister's family at Jacksonville. Now this is interesting. Jacksonville is where I was born, also the place where it all began. Now what is that steroid-filled Adidas sandal up to? Looks like he isn't as much nutty. I just smiled at her. Oh, come on, girl. I wouldn't even talk to Cole. You know me. I would never betray my bestie for another man. You know sisters before meisters. He will never come between us. In fact, he will never hurt you again. I said, smiling, knowing that the steroid-filled balloon needs to be popped. Mia is too important for my normal image, as much as annoying she is. She is an important piece in my chessboard. I still had a year left in college, after all. Satisfied, she gets up to leave, and I watch her walk away. She's happy, content. She thinks we've shared something meaningful. That's the beauty of it. The beauty of not caring. People will always be eager to give you what they think you want. They'll hand over their trust, their secrets, their love, if you know how to ask for it, if you know how to play the game. I look out the window, the sunlight spilling through the glass. The shadows outside, stretched long and dark across the street, no longer seemed as menacing. The shadow hadn't vanished entirely, but it didn't need to. It was part of my story, part of what made me who I am. And by facing it, I had taken control over my own narrative. As I sat there thinking, I felt a sense of clarity I hadn't experienced before. There was still work to do, still parts of myself to uncover and accept. But I wasn't afraid to keep moving forward. After all, the worst of it, the part that had kept me locked in fear, was already behind me. My phone vibrated. Hey, it was a text from Cole. I called him. I just couldn't text him, for I already knew everything. I asked him to meet me at the Lover's Cliff. It was just a secluded cliff on the top where all of them went to make out. Cole, the steroid-fueled cupcake, thought I asked him to meet there because I wanted to make out. I drove and waited for him there. I was scared. Not because he was walking slowly towards me and looking at me like a predator looking at his prey, but because I knew the truth. I was the big bad wolf, and he was just the shepherd who cried wolf. I slowly and seductively walked towards him. Licking my lips, I watched him follow my action. I have a secret? I asked, my voice barely a whisper, as if it were a secret in itself. Yes, he said, smiling and reaching in front of me. And you know about it? I asked, trying to look serious and running my nails slowly along his chest and going around his neck. Yes, he said, smirking and holding my waist. I shivered a little as his fingers made exotic patterns on the exposed skin of my waist. I pulled him closer to my face by his neck and played with his soft hair. And this secret is what? I whispered slowly, our lips almost touching. You don't know about it yet, he said, looking at my lips with lustful eyes. Let me get this straight. I have a secret that I don't know about, but you know about it? I kissed him, giving him exactly what he wanted. The kiss was slow at first, then it turned to a battle for domination. He thinks he knows me. He believes he knows my secret. I let him get his way for a few seconds, and then pulled his hair which made him open his mouth, and I let my tongue in to show him how it's done. He didn't mind, really. Two can play the game. He was about to grab my ass when suddenly I pushed him, and down he fell. I am sorry. You knew my secret. You had to die. Nothing personal, really. For what it's worth, you were a good kisser, I shouted, looking down the cliff at his falling figure, my hair flowing back and laughing maniacally. The shadow of the past. In the depths of the hospital's darkest ward, I sat beside my grandfather's bed, the only sound, the faint hum of the life support machines. The air was heavy with the stench of decay, and the flickering fluorescent lights above cast eerie shadows on the walls. "Kiddo," he whispered, his voice like a rusty gate creaking in the wind. "I got something to tell you." I leaned in close, my heart racing with anticipation. "What is it, Grandpa?" He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling with the effort. "I was involved in a ritual many years ago. A young woman was sacrificed, and I helped cover it up." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My grandfather, the man I'd always admired and respected, was capable of such a horrific act? "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, trying to process my emotions. Grandpa's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, kiddo. I'm so sorry. I've carried this guilt with me for so long, and I don't want to take it to my grave." I looked at my grandfather, seeing him in a new light. I felt a mix of emotions: shock, anger, sadness, and compassion. "Grandpa," I said, my voice soft, "I forgive you, but I need to ask you something." "What's that, kiddo?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you want me to reveal the truth, or keep your secret safe?" Grandpa's face contorted in a mixture of pain and relief. "Please, kiddo, keep my secret safe. I don't want to hurt anyone else with my mistakes." I nodded, feeling a weight settle upon my shoulders. "I'll keep your secret, Grandpa. But promise me one thing." "What's that, kiddo?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Promise me you'll find peace. Finally. You've carried this burden for so long. It's time to let it go." Grandpa's eyes filled with tears again, and he nodded, a small smile on his lips. "I promise, kiddo. I'll find peace. Finally." As I sat there, holding my grandfather's hand, I knew that I would keep his secret safe, but I also knew that I would carry the weight of that secret with me forever. The darkness closed in around us, and I could feel the presence of the unknown, lurking just beyond the edge of perception. I knew that I had to make a choice: to reveal the truth, or to keep the secret hidden. And as I looked into my grandfather's eyes, I knew that I would choose the latter. For in the world of shadows and secrets, sometimes the truth is better left unspoken. The machines surrounding us beeped and whirred, a constant reminder of my grandfather's mortality. I looked at him, seeing the pain and guilt etched on his face. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I'll keep your secret safe, but promise me one thing." "What's that, kiddo?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Promise me you'll find peace. Finally. You've carried this burden for so long. It's time to let it go." Grandpa's eyes filled with tears again, and he nodded, a small smile on his lips. "I promise, kiddo. I'll find peace. Finally." As the darkness closed in around us, I knew that I would keep his secret safe. But I also knew that I would carry the weight of that secret with me forever. And as I looked into my grandfather's eyes, I saw something that chilled me to the bone, a glimmer of evil, a spark of malevolence that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. I knew then that I had made a terrible mistake. I had promised to keep my grandfather's secret safe, but I had no idea what horrors that secret might unleash. As the machines surrounding us beeped and whirred, I knew that I was trapped in a living nightmare with no escape in sight. Here is a prequel to the story. Origins, New Orleans, 1955. Etienne Lafleur, a young and ambitious occultist, stood in the dimly lit chamber, surrounded by the members of the mysterious Order of the Red Hand. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something else, something darker. "Brothers and sisters," Etienne began, his voice dripping with conviction, "we stand at the threshold of a new era, an era of power, of knowledge, of transcendence." The members of the Order nodded in agreement, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. "But to achieve this goal," Etienne continued, "we must be willing to make sacrifices, to push the boundaries of what is acceptable, of what is human." The members of the Order murmured among themselves, their voices filled with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Etienne raised his hands, and the room fell silent. "I propose that we perform the ritual of the Red Hand," he said, his voice dripping with anticipation. "A ritual that will grant us the power to transcend the limitations of the human form." The members of the Order nodded in agreement, and Etienne began to outline the details of the ritual. As the night wore on, the members of the Order prepared for the ritual, their movements filled with a sense of urgency and anticipation. And Etienne, the young and ambitious occultist, stood at the center of it all, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. The ritual began, and the members of the order chanted and swayed, their voices and movements building to a crescendo of power and energy. And at the center of it all, Etienne stood, his eyes fixed on the young woman who was to be the sacrifice. The ritual reached its climax, and the young woman screamed as Etienne plunged the dagger into her heart. The members of the order cheered and chanted, their voices filled with a sense of triumph and power. And Etienne, the young and ambitious occultist, stood at the center of it all, his eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. But as the ritual came to a close, Etienne felt a sense of unease, a sense of guilt and regret. He looked down at the young woman's lifeless body, and he knew that he had made a terrible mistake. The ritual may have granted him power, but it had also cursed him with a guilt that would haunt him for the rest of his life. And as Etienne walked away from the ritual chamber, he knew that he would never be able to escape the shadow of the past. Henry was average in almost every measure of the word. He worked in a company that, like himself, was totally and completely ordinary. Nothing he did on a day-to-day basis mattered. And that was just the way he liked. All that changed, however, when he showed up to his office one day. He'd been there for a few hours at this point, mindlessly typing away at his keyboard, when a thought occurred to him. Why had it been so quiet? Now, usually, he was the first one to the office and quickly settled into his desk. He would close the door and get lost in a sea of numbers and words. Still, though, Henry would always hear some chatter from behind his door. Maybe the beep of the copier or the laugh of a joke. Never had it been utterly silent like this. Henry tried to get out of his mind. He tried to continue with his work. Henry continued typing. Usually, his work soothed Henry, but now a growing sense of uneasiness filled him. Somehow, he knew that if he stopped working and dared to open his office door, everything he loved about his life would come to an end suddenly and horrifically. Henry continued typing. Henry knew that he couldn't keep mindlessly typing at his keyboard. So, he decided to get up and investigate what was happening. Henry continued typing. It appeared that Henry didn't want to follow the laid-out structure of the story. Perhaps he thought that if he kept typing and doing his work, all this wouldn't be happening. That's the spirit, Henry. Bravo. You figured it out. Well done. But seriously, don't you think it's time to face the inevitable and open the door? Henry continued typing. All right, you win, Henry. I'll leave you alone now and let you live out the rest of your life in ignorant bliss. Goodbye, Henry. Henry paused and stood up. He walked over to his door and opened it slowly. Henry couldn't pretend to keep working any longer. He walked over to his door and tossed the door open. as if to say, "I don't fear the situation I am currently in. In fact, I am Henry, and I laugh in the face of danger." The door slammed against the wall and revealed an empty office. The brave protagonist decided to get to the bottom of this. Henry walked carefully out of his office. Then, he walked down a hallway and stopped at a set of stairs. The left set went up, and the right set went down. Upon coming to a set of stairs, Henry took the one on his left. Henry paused for a moment before heading down the right set of stairs. For some reason, beyond all common sense, Henry decided to take the stairs on the right. He surely knew that there was nothing at the bottom of those as he descended each step. After all, he'd been an employee at the company for, I don't honestly know how long. My, how embarrassing. Well, let's say longer than a year and less than 100 years. Yes, I'm quite happy we've come to an agreement. Henry reached the bottom of the stairs. He looked around and saw nothing there except for a bucket. He walked over and picked up the bucket, then headed back up the stairs. Ah, yes, the bucket. Quite a crucial piece of the story. I'm glad you spent all that time walking to the bottom of the stairs for a bucket. Henry made his way to the original fork in the stairs and went up this time. An eerie feeling began to creep into Henry. He hoped that maybe he had just missed a memo and everyone was in an early morning meeting. They were rare, but did happen from time to time. Once he reached the top of the stairs, he walked through an open door and into the meeting room. Henry clutched at the bucket dearly. The bucket was a soothing presence for Henry and comforted him. He needed every bit of comfort he could manage because the meeting room was completely empty. Not a sign of life, except for half a box of donuts from the day before. Henry quickly walked through the room and into the hallway. After a short while, he came to 3 closed doors. On the left was a red door. In the middle was a purple door. On the right was a green door with a sign on the front that read, "Do not enter unless you wish to be fired." Henry knew he should enter the door on the right because that was his boss's office. If someone knew what was happening, it would be his boss. He would have to risk the chance of being fired. Henry walked over to the red door and turned the handle. He pulled on the door. It rattled, but didn't open. Without a second doubt, Henry knew he should go his boss's office. So, he entered the door on his right, the green door. Henry walked over to the purple door and turned the handle, then pulled on the door. It rattled, but didn't open. Ahem. Perhaps I wasn't clear. Henry walked over to the green door and walked inside his boss's office. Does nobody have respect for a good story anymore? It's a good thing I remembered to lock those doors. Henry opened the green door and walked inside. When Henry walked inside his boss's office, To no one's surprise, it was empty. There was nothing but a solid wood desk and huge bookcases on each side. At that moment, Henry resigned himself to a life of solitude. He was sure that he was going to spend the rest of his miserable life in complete and utter isolation. And he was okay with that. Come to think of it, he never really liked having his co-workers around, did he? Sure, he didn't hate the small talk or the company meetings, but he was certain he could come to terms with being without. It may even allow him to focus more completely on his work. Then, a horrible thought crossed his mind. How would he work if there was no one to send his completed documents to? Truly a tough one. That's it. Henry will be the worker and the boss. Yes, that's genius. This way, he can continue to play out his mundane life and find some semblance of happiness. Well, I guess that's it then. Henry spent the rest of his time working away at his desk, while occasionally walking up the stairs and approving all his glorious work. Henry really was a superb and hard-working employee. Henry still stood in his boss's office. He stared at a big red button that said, "Do not touch," in big letters. He walked over to it and pressed it. Oh, Henry, what did you think would happen when you pressed the button? Setting aside the obvious fact that it was clearly stated for you not to touch, did you think that by pressing the button, you could fight against the system? Fight against your fate? Fight against me? Ha ha ha. I applaud your resilience, Henry. Truly. Henry pressed the button again. Okay. This is starting to get pathetic now, Henry. How about you just head back to your office, and we'll go with the ending I already planned out for you. I know you, Henry. I know that you need someone to tell you what to do, and that without that, you can't function. So, I am telling you now, Henry, to turn around and go to your office and get back to work. Henry pressed the button again. The building shook, and Henry had to brace himself to avoid falling over. Henry, why did you do that? Didn't I just give you a direct order? If you press that button again, Henry pressed the button again. The building shook more violently this time. It shook until Henry felt like he might pass out. Then it all stopped at once. Henry waited, bucket firmly in hand, for a long time in that office. Henry waited until he felt like it was long enough. Finally, there was no one telling him what he should think or how he should act. It was a freeing sensation, but also a deeply disturbing one. Perhaps he would have been better off blindly listening to that voice, but it was too late to second-guess himself now. So, he turned around and headed back to his office. Henry looked down at his watch. Almost time for lunch. Finding Lucas. "He's in there. I know he is," said Mark to no one. kneeling behind a tree and staring through binoculars. He started to count. 3, 4, 5. I can take 5. This was only the people he could see, and he couldn't be sure that there weren't more. He'd have to wait another hour, then go in under the guise of darkness, or risk being caught. An hour was a long time to wait, when all you want is to be reunited. But if he wasn't smart about this, he'd die before he could ever help Lucas. 3 days earlier, Mark and his 6-year-old son, Lucas, were eating cans of beans by a fire in the desolate woods. They assumed they were all alone. And why wouldn't they? When you're living through a zombie apocalypse, you're almost always alone. Mark had been recounting tales about the boy's mother from before he was born. This only saddened Lucas, since he never got to meet her. She died giving birth to him, back when modern medicine wasn't hard to come by, and before the day of darkness, the name the survivors dubbed for the start of the apocalypse. Survivors was a funny word to both of them, since they hadn't seen a single other human in the past 6 months. The last human they saw met his end at the hands of Mark and his trusty 8-inch blade he kept strapped to his ankle. The red-headed drunk had stumbled upon the two of them while they were pillaging an already slim, rationed convenience store. Seemingly friendly at first, he approached them with a good-natured spirit. It turned dark very quickly when he elbowed Mark in the face, picked up Lucas, and made a run for it. Carrying a 6-year-old boy slowed you down mightily, and Mark caught up to him rather quickly. In the old days, Mark would have just tackled him to the ground and called the authorities. But that was the old days. Now, the only justice was the one you served up yourself. Mark stuck his blade directly between the drunk's shoulder blades, and he went down hard, splitting his head open against the pavement, choking on his own blood in the process. He had fallen on top of Lucas, but luckily, the boy had not sustained any injuries. No physical ones, that is. The trauma, on the other hand. Back in the old world, children were just that. Someone's product of love. In the new world, after the day of darkness, children became a commodity. This was because the disease that had infected humans and made them turn into the creatures we so eloquently refer to as zombies affected 99.99% of children. Studies showed, this was when there were still studies to be had, that it only affected about 96% of citizens above the age of 15. This made children a delicacy, a chance to repopulate the world, one human at a time. A modern-day Adam or Eve. 4% of the world's population went unaffected, except for the after effects. After the day of darkness, everyone resorted to killing each other to preserve any food or shelter that still remained. For all Mark knew, he and Lucas were the only two people remaining on Earth. That's what he thought, until 3 nights ago. Are we going to see Mommy in heaven when we get there? Lucas asked, innocently. "Yeah, buddy," Mark said glumly. "We sure are. She's waiting for us. I wish she didn't have to be there. I wish she was here with us right now." "Me too, pal. Me too." They sat in silence, listening only to the crickets singing their nightly ballad and the sound of the spoons scraping against the bottom of the cans of beans. But then, crack. A twig snapped. Mark's ears perked up, but then the silence continued. He glanced around, and all he could see was darkness. His eyes stopped on his boy, his sweet, innocent boy, who didn't deserve this life. He deserved to be a normal kid, to grow up with parents who loved him, in a house with a swing set and video games on the TV. Instead, they were always on the run, preserving their lives. A tear formed in his eye as he stared, watching that wonderful boy spoon a mouthful of beans into his mouth. His son made eye contact and gave a smile, but then his face instantly turned to a look of terror. Mark noticed movement in the bushes behind Lucas and assumed Lucas's terror was brought upon by noticing movement behind Mark. Before he could turn around to see, Mark was knocked out cold. He wasn't out for long, maybe a minute or two, and when he came to the group of pillagers were leaving, they had the boy hog-tied, and two burly men carried him like he was a pig on a stake. Mark went to jump up, but a knee met his back. At least he thought it was a knee. Instant pain struck him. He turned over to see the man's face, and that's when his world started to blur. He had a small knife protruding from his side. "The boy's ours, motherfucker," said the gangly man who was missing 2 teeth. "Go to the clearing now." Mark passed out. That had been 3 days ago. He had spent the last 3 days trying to follow the tracks of the group who had taken his son. He was slow-paced, having limited flexibility and immense pain from the gash in his back. The knife missed any major arteries or nerves, and mostly just caught the fat muscles. Still, the pain was excruciating. But Mark knew if he let too much time pass, the trail would run cold, and he'd lose it forever. Along with his boy, the tracks had led him to a small town. He found a tree to hide behind while he could scope it out. In his satchel, which he was fortunate enough to still have, he always stored his gear 50 or so yards away from his campsite, just in case. He had a pair of binoculars, which he took out and used to get a better view of the town. He knew he'd have to wait another hour or so until darkness fell, but he only saw 5 people, and he thought under the darkness of night, he could take 5 people out. He would be reunited with his son soon enough. Night came, and he readied himself. He carried a long machete, which was stained brownish red, having been used on one too many people since the day of darkness. Too many people that Mark hated to admit. He slowly approached the town from the south side, where he saw only one guard. This would be the most crucial. They had firearms on them, and he knew if he could take down the first guard quietly, he'd have a firearm of his own if needed. He waited patiently as the guard did their stroll backwards and forwards. Once he knew the pattern, he took a deep breath and waited for his opportunity. After he heard 3 steps, he knew the guard would turn, and that's when he would pounce. 1. He thought about his wife. 2. He thought about Lucas, scared and alone. 3. He knew it was time to pounce. Mark jumped out from behind the wall, and the guard turned around instantly. The guard went to scream, but Mark brought the machete down rapidly into his neck, spraying a fresh coat of blood all over Mark's face. The guard went down without a minimal thud. Mark picked up the AR-15 rifle and slung it over his shoulder. He was just getting started. Taking down the next 2 was easier than he anticipated. When someone had a gun and they were standing guard, you'd assume they were a trained soldier. Sometimes, even Mark forgot that they were living in this desolate world. And these were just normal people who had normal jobs and normal lives before the world went to shit. He himself had been a CPA, and now he'd branded himself a modern-day Rambo. The world had changed, and everyone had to adjust. These 2 guards, 1 man and 1 woman, didn't even realize he was there until it was too late. He had grabbed the woman's mouth from behind while swinging the machete upwards towards the man, slicing from the bottom of his protruding gut right up to his chin, killing him instantly when it sliced his jugular. The woman fought, but Mark snapped her neck, killing her instantly too. 3 down and 2 to go. He had to find Lucas. Slowly, he tiptoed around the town, looking into empty house windows and around corners, until he finally saw a fire pit with 3 people sitting around it. They were enjoying dinner and joking and laughing. He recognized 2 of them immediately. The 2 bigger ones were the 2 who carried Lucas away. They had Lucas somewhere, and he intended to find out where. He approached them from behind. AR-15 raised at the biggest of the 3, set in his sights. He got as close as he dared before making his grand entrance. As soon as he stopped, he shot the tall guard sitting on the left of the fire straight through the head. The other 2 were startled. "Don't fucking move!" Mark shouted. They didn't. Both men raised their hands, but didn't dare turn around to face their attacker. Mark flanked them on the left, rifle raised, and aimed at them until they were in eyesight. "Where's my son?" the third man said. "Mister, I don't know what." Mark shot him in the forehead, and his body collapsed with a thud. The remaining man, the second guard, perked up stolidly, trying not to show any fear or weakness. "Where is he?" Mark said, anger trembling in his voice. His finger was pressed on the trigger with enough force that at any second the bullet could discharge. But he stood firm. "Where?" The man picked up a piece of meat from his place and took a bite. He smiled at Mark, then said, "This was his leg. It's delicious." Mark instantly felt numb. They had cooked and ate his son. This is what the world had come to. No, he couldn't believe it. The man was just trying to mess with him. And then the man started to laugh, slightly at first, then harder and more wildly. "No," Mark said, and pulled the trigger. The man's top half of his head was ripped off, and he fell backwards. Mark approached and stood over his body, then emptied the clip bullet by bullet into the man's chest. He was sobbing as he did it, and continued to pull the trigger until he heard that fateful click, click, click of an empty chamber. He fell to his knees, and that's when he felt the pang of steel press against the back of his head. The man who stabbed him, the gangly man with 2 teeth missing, was pressing a pistol against the back of his head. "Well, looky here. Back from the dead, I see. And from the looks of it, you're angry and taking your vengeance." The man looked around at all his dead friends. "That wasn't very nice. Now was it? You killed my son, cooked him, and ate him," Mark pleaded through tears. "And I'm supposed to be nice?" He was breathing heavily, angry and full of adrenaline. "Ate I am? Boy, we ain't cannibals here." Mark got a spark of hope, reached stealthily into his ankle holder, and pulled out the 8-inch knife he kept there. When he could tell the man was distracted, looking at his dead friends, Mark dove right, swinging his left arm up to hit the man's arm and knock the gun away. At the same time, he came across with his right hand, slicing at the man's legs, instantly causing the man to go down shrieking in pain. Mark jumped on his back, wrestled him fully to the ground, and grabbed a tuft of his hair. He yanked back and pressed his blade against the man's neck. "Your man just admitted to it," he screamed. "He was trying to get under your skin," the man pleaded. "Please, I'll tell you where he is. Just don't kill me. Please." Mark pressed the knife harder against the skin, and the man could feel the cold steel pierce the thin skin in his neck. "You have 10 seconds, Mark said. "How do I know you ain't just gonna kill me after I tell you?" the man asked. "You have my word. Tell me where he is, and I'll let you go. 6, 5, 4, okay." Okay. About a mile south of here, there's a village. A bigger village. They have goods that we never had access to. We traded him this morning for food and booze. It includes that whole pig you saw my man eating over there. How do I know you're telling the truth? Mark asked, pressing the blade slightly harder. My pocket, the man choked. There's a written bill of sale in my pocket. Mark loosened his grip, and the man let in a deep gasp of air. It includes 2 more restocks of supplies over the next 3 months. Your boy was worth a hell of a lot to a village looking to build the world over again. He heaved, trying to catch his breath, and coughed. Mark reached into the man's pocket and grabbed the paper. He was telling the truth. How many people in the village? Mark asked. I don't know. 20, 25 maybe? Mark had what he needed. Take the paper and use it to barter for your... Mark slit the man's throat before he could finish. Blood oozed from his throat at a rate Mark had never seen. The man went limp, and Mark stood up. He spit on the man's back. Go to the clearing, he said, then kicked the man's lifeless body. Lucas was alive, still lost, but alive as far as he knew. He was in a village a mile away, with 25 people guarding it. He'd need weapons. He'd need rest. He'd need courage. Mark gathered up all the weapons and ammo he could find in the town and brought them into one house. He cleaned everything, loaded everything, and made his plan. He'd sleep, heal, and rest. Then tomorrow, he'd get his son. One way or another, he'd get his son. Fear, switch. My eyes were wide open now, pupils dilated, and blood freezing in my veins. I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest to get away from it all, since I couldn't. It was as if I had encountered Medusa and was turned to stone. I guess, if you think about it, the last feeling you're left with forever, when you realize your entire life will amount to nothing but a petrified, cold figure, is exactly this. Fear, pure fear, the kind that makes you realize there is no escape, no chance to do anything to help yourself. These kinds of things never crossed my mind because I avoid situations that make me uncomfortable, anxious, and especially afraid. I'm not an adventurous person, someone who would seize the moment rather than regret it. But somehow, I ended up here, so scared that I'm unable to move, feeling a terrifying scream caught in my throat, unable to let it out, to even say a word, to ask for help. I knew I should have gotten out of this situation the moment I realized what I had gotten myself into. I shouldn't have come here. It all started this morning when my twin sister, Anne, asked me to go on a boat ride with her. She said she had booked it in advance and had been so excited to go with her fiancé. They paid for and prepared everything. But he got called into work, and she didn't know what to do because they couldn't cancel. She didn't want to go alone. I couldn't say no. I could already see the disappointment on her face, so I agreed to go. I wasn't a big fan of the ocean, but a boat ride didn't seem too bad or demanding. After all, I'd just have to attend and sit through it. My mistake was not paying much attention to her yapping when she told me about it. Her speech was rousing, and I couldn't interrupt and ask her to start over because I wasn't listening. So I ended up on a boat facing my oldest fear. The floating horror in question arrived to pick us up when I realized what I had gotten myself into. I can't believe you're actually doing this with me. I mean, coral reef scuba diving is something anyone would love, but it's such a depth. I thought you had some sort of sea phobia, Anne said. My heart started racing, and I sat down for a moment. I tried to breathe and control my distress, denying my thalassophobia, badly remembered by my sister, after she nagged me about our childhood and how she knew I told her something similar. I finally convinced her to stop searching for my deepest fears. Unlike Anne, I never forgot how everyone laughed at me when I confided in them. I couldn't bear being mocked again, especially now when I'd rather drown than do this. I had to get out of this boat, out of this situation. My palms were sweating, and I could hear my pulse in my ears. Boat engine starts. Oh no! Nope! No way. This can't be happening, I thought, worst case scenarios flooding my mind. I felt like living all of them, from the overthinking that made my body tense and weak in sudden shifts. I think I'm going to be sick. I feel dizzy. I can't do this. I hated feeling this way, trapped between pessimism and irrational fear. Usually, I use overthinking to my advantage, avoiding anything that would inconvenience me, not to help me escape a real threat or possible deadly situation after filtering it through my thinking. What am I doing? What will I do? I am losing precious time in which I could have found an excuse to turn this boat around. My mind can't work under this pressure, and my body sure isn't very helpful. What's wrong? You seem kind of pale. I hope you're still up for this. I'm so excited to do this with you, Anne. I couldn't let her down. Not when she had that spark in her eyes. A spark I hadn't seen since we were kids. She looked like a 5-year-old on Christmas morning. And maybe I was just being paranoid. Don't worry, I won't ruin this for you. It's just a little motion sickness. I treacherously lied to my sister, with whom I had shared everything my whole life. I couldn't tell her the truth out of fear she'll laugh at me, and I would no longer feel just afraid, but also ashamed and upset. Well then, stop overthinking. As long as you don't get swimming sickness, you'll be fine. We're almost there." Anne smiled warmly, in her specific way that usually melted my worries. But now, it only calmed me enough to avoid turning into a lunatic. We started putting on our equipment as we moved farther and farther into the deep ocean. 1,000 meters? 2,000 meters? It's been a while since we were able to see any land. I didn't want to think about the depth we were at, so I kept telling myself it wasn't that deep. Our ride wasn't longer than an hour, but the motorboat moved fast. Stop it. I won't think about this anymore. Meanwhile, my sister explained the use of everything in our gear and the emergency action plan that we shouldn't get in much detail with because it's just a precaution, as she learned in her training. I would describe it to you, but my mind got blank and I can't remember a word she said. Sometimes I'm having a hard time paying attention when something else is bothering me, so my thoughts spiraled elsewhere. It was time to enter the water in order to be done and on our way by sunset. Anne dove in head first, waiting for me. I entered slowly from the edge. I think by this time it was clear I wasn't thrilled to do this, so she waited to make sure I'd actually follow her. I wasn't afraid of water or swimming, and the ocean was calm today. If the waves had matched my anxiety, I wouldn't have come this far. I closed my eyes and submerged myself. The world around me and all my worries vanished briefly. I felt weightless and my mind cleared. But the quiet was deafening, and it would soon turn eerie. Once I got used to the feeling, I opened my eyes and my stomach tightened. I felt so small and exposed. All I could see was water, shades of blue forming a bottomless void, darker and darker when you dared to venture below. My sister was having a blast. Her eyes were wide and curious, and her smile kept widening. She pulled my hand to go deeper. I didn't like that idea, but losing myself in this place, with no landmarks to help me navigate for sure, wasn't better. We swam, and I focused on inhaling and exhaling slowly to calm myself, counting every breath rather than the minutes I still had to endure this. 56, 57, 58. I kept swimming slowly to avoid getting tired. What if I reached exhaustion here and didn't have the strength to return to the surface? Cynical me gets all kinds of ideas, but they aren't important now, since I have bigger things to worry about. I hoped my sister would get bored faster, so we could get out of here. It wasn't long until I saw it. At first, I thought we'd been down here for hours, and the sky had darkened with nightfall. But I knew I was wrong, because a few moments later, the lighting changed again. I could see the warm daylight filtering through the surface, like it does through tree branches. 120, 121, 122. Anne noticed it too and looked up. But the surroundings above us didn't seem to have changed. The second time it happened, it was more sudden and got even darker than before. But like the first time, it faded before our eyes could adjust. I started to worry because I realized faster than Anne what was happening. My body was overcome with fatigue, and I was distressed. You could see the unsettling look on my face as I glanced at my sister, too afraid to check the surroundings. Unlike me, Anne let her reflexes kick in and looked up and down to figure things out. She wasn't agitated or scared. She just lost the charming smile she'd had moments ago and now looked serious. I wanted to curl up and hide. My heart pounded in my chest, so I started to slowly close my eyes, trying to disappear for a second. Just then, my sister grabbed my hand. She managed to pull me just a bit closer, and when I opened my eyes, I saw it. 134, 135, 136, 137. We were both stunned, and it felt like the whole world stopped. I tried to keep breathing, but it felt as though this place and I were frozen in time. It was right in front of us, and I could only see a small part of it, yet it was massive. I couldn't comprehend the size difference in that moment. Its big eye was staring at us, cold and emotionless. This is how my nightmares always began. I would see it and try to swim away, but never managed to escape before waking up. It would catch me and swallow me whole. But in my mind, I imagined the stories you are told as a kid, or the ones you see in movies. This was entirely different. Facing a gigantic whale, feeling it look through your fears, not knowing what to do, or if you'll live to see tomorrow. 149, 150, 151. My eyes were wide open now, pupils dilated, and blood freezing in my veins. I felt like my heart was going to jump out of my chest to get away from it all. Since I couldn't, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to swim to shore, but I was too afraid. I thought that moment would never end until I felt it. Anne grabbed my feet and pushed me toward the surface. 171, 172, 173, 174. After she gave me that boost, I felt like I had the strength to keep going. I swam as fast as I could, not looking back to avoid letting fear overwhelm me. I could see the surface, the sun, and in no time, the sky and the boat. I scrambled in, and as soon as I felt the solid ground beneath my feet, I rubbed my eyes and tried to adjust them to the light as quick as possible. 226, 227,228. I looked in all directions. Water, water, water. All I could see was the damn ocean. I waited a little more, kept looking, but there was nothing. Exhaustion and despair washed over me. I kept searching in sight, but it was hopeless. I couldn't see Anne anywhere. I collapsed onto the cold wooden deck, and tears started rolling down my cheeks. I felt like I was falling apart, so I just stood there for a while, sobbing. I thought about how foolish I'd been not to tell her. Everyone laughed at me for nothing. If I had just told her, she would have understood why I didn't want to do this. I was terrified of whales. Maybe we would have turned back, and this would never have happened. I'm sorry. I kept whispering through my sobs. I knew no one would laugh at me now. I wished I had conquered my fear earlier, so I could have been the one to give her one more breath to take. The end search. And you might find. Search, and you might find. I am an independent journalist, living in a world of news spilling out at an unprecedented rate in the history of mankind. Much of it was false, without any factual evidence. Lies and untruths seemed to be the norm. Each morning, when I opened my computer or picked up the mail, it took a good hour to sort through the garbage. Today, I had a pleasant surprise. An invitation from an old friend to spend a quiet weekend in his country manor. It was about 2 years ago since I last saw him at Penelope's wedding. We had a bet their marriage would not last 5 years. As far as I knew, she was still married. But she remained a very demanding woman. At the university, I had been a very close friend of George Webster. He was now Sir Webster, a member of Parliament. He was a pleasant chap with a head of white hair and a round, chubby face with distinctive blue eyes. He had a corpulent body, no doubt, from hearty meals and plenty of drinking. His wife was quite the opposite, with a slender profile and reddish hair arranged like a beehive on the top of her head. She had a wicked sense of humor and was always enjoyable company. I was looking forward to a quiet weekend in the country. I arrived an hour before dinner to face a manor built 200 years ago. George inherited it from his parents. I remember the parties here when we were students at the university. His parents were great hosts, always inviting a selection of pretty young girls. I believe they wanted to make sure George meets the young people they approved of. George came leaping to the front door and hugged me with great affection. I will get the maid to show your room. No need to dress for dinner. We will only be us three. Come down to the drawing room in half an hour for cocktails. While George handed me a whiskey, I warmly embarrassed his wife. Nothing had changed. The beehive on the top of her head was still in place. I am always delighted to be served at dinner with good food and stimulating conversation. His wife left us the moment an excellent cigar and cognac were forthcoming. Once George's cigar was lit, he spoke. "David, do you remember that time at the university I taught you how to catch butterflies?" "Sure I do." "Why are you still an ardent collector and improving your collection?" "If I remember correctly, you were obsessed with butterflies. Bring your cognac and come with me. I want to show you something." We went down a small passage. At the end was a locked door. George took a key from his pocket, opened the door, and switched on a series of overhead spotlights. I have never seen such a beautiful show of hundreds of butterflies with their vibrant and delicate colors. The room was about 26 square meters, with waist-high side oak cabinets surrounding all the 3 walls. The upper 3 walls were covered with 3 large frames of magnificent pinned butterflies. I could see each frame was labeled with the title of 3 continents: the Americas, Europe, and Africa. I stood there, bewildered, completely stunted by the beauty of the room. As I walked in, I noticed a large, comfortable couch in the middle of the room. It was unusual in that it had 2 sides, allowing one to change their position in order to view all sides of the room. In front of each side of the couch was a coffee table. I turned around to view the wall in which the door was positioned. The wall was covered with a wall-to-wall library. George suggested we should sit down. As you notice, I specialize in rare butterflies from 3 land masses. You will notice there is a gape of 2 butterflies in the Americas display. 1 the European and 2 on the African. Under each butterfly, I always mark the date and place it was found. According to my book collection and extensive research, these butterflies represent extremely rare spies. I like to think it is one of the world's greatest collections, representing hundreds of hours of travel and research. To be complete, I need to fill in the 5 missing specimens. George, it is totally amazing. The display of these remarkably beautiful creatures makes one feel belittled when compared with the creations of nature. What's in the drawers below? More butterflies that I thought were interesting on my travels, searching for that rare specimen, as I am known throughout the world as a collector. I have a network of people that inform me that they have seen a rare butterfly. The world has many well-informed amateurs interested in these creatures. In fact, last week, I had a call from a friend in Zimbabwe saying that a flame-bordered carex had been sighted near Victoria Falls. This is one of the extremely rare butterflies I am missing in my collection. Unfortunately, at this time, I cannot leave for Victoria Falls. David, do you want a free 2-week holiday in Zimbabwe? I don't understand. So, well, you could go and spend a few days looking for this rare butterfly. I know you are very careful in netting butterflies without damaging them. The whole trip would be my expense. Supposing I did net this rare butterfly, how would I get it out of the country? No doubt, these creators are protected by strict export laws. You are right, and collectors like me have to be very careful. In the case of Zimbabwe, I would ask you to deliver the specimen to a friend in the capital, Harare. He will then carefully pin it into an old collection of common butterflies that Victorian families love to collect and frame. He will then ship it out to a London antique dealer. This rare butterfly, mixed in an old frame, will go unnoticed by the customs. I can see you are well versed in extracting these treasures from various countries. I have never been to Victoria Falls. They say it is one of the world's spectacular sights. If I agree to go, would there be somebody there to meet me? Yes, my contact would meet you at Victoria's airport and take you to your hotel. He will be your guide the whole trip. I suggest you spend 2 days as a tourist, and then the next 8 days exploring the forest where the butterfly was sighted. If not found in 8 days, take the plane back home. If you, by a miracle, manage to capture it, I ask you to fly to Harare and give it to my friend there. At this point, I recommend you fly home from there. If an overnight stay is required in the capital, my friend will arrange it. These trips are always a gamble, but to add this butterfly to my collection, it is worth the cost of the gamble. We collectors are brain-damaged human beings, obsessed to complete the items we collect in a satisfying and logical manner. Of course, I will supply all the necessary equipment. You will need to consult your doctor about a trip of this nature so that he can supply you with all the necessary preventive medicines. No visa at this point is required for Zimbabwe. So are you game? Just a minute. Let me look at my diary. Yes, I think I could go next week. Is that a yes? I will need 24 hours to make a decision, as I have some commitments next week. If you do go, I suggest you go through Johannesburg and then on to Victoria Falls. Leave the return ticket open, as you might want to fly back through Harare. My man, his name is Robin, born near Victoria Falls, will be with you your whole time in Zimbabwe. It had been several years since I was last in Africa. My knowledge of the various countries on the continent was mainly in the north, so to travel to the south would be an interesting venture. As I sat enjoying a first-class meal on British Airways, it did cross my mind that maybe George had already planned my visit before I was asked down for a weekend. No doubt, his thoughts were that a free trip to Victoria would not be turned down. I also realized dedicated collectors will employ any means available to achieve their ambitions. In my mind's eye, I could see him spending evenings in his butterfly room, completely transfixed by the beauty of these creators. No doubt this room is where George found a haven of peace from his responsibilities of his daily existence. These butterflies not only were creators of extreme beauty, but represented for George a lifetime of dedicated research and traveling to far-off lands to find the rare specimen. At the university, he had always been an avid butterfly collector, but I never realized the depth of his passion. I remember enjoying myself on various county outings, looking for interesting butterflies. Now, in an artful way, he has got me involved. He must have thought I might be smitten by the activity. The truth of my interest in this trip was Victoria Falls. Naturally, if by some chance I found the rare butterfly, it would give me a warm feeling of self-esteem. As the air hostess passed, I ordered a glass of champagne and toasted to my success. The African journey had begun. First to admire the falls and to search for the missing rare specimen. Johannesburg Airport was vast, obviously with no restriction on land constraints. No doubt, copied from the American and European textbook. You had to walk through large shopping malls filled with many life-size copies of wild animals made out of various woods, clay, and other materials. Sizes and prices for all comers. For a second, I had a vision that this extensive animal kingdom became alive and started to enjoy the sweet human flesh of passengers awaiting planes. Interesting thought, but a chilling turn of events. At the airport, I found Robin waiting. The first thing I noticed as we drove towards the hotel was the soft and seductive African daylight with a warm weather that seemed to envelop you in its arms. Also, through the car window, I was able to admire a series of magnificent trees unique to Africa. About 10 kilometers from Victoria Falls, we turned up a small country road to the hotel. There, I found a little patch of paradise. It corresponded to the photographs shown on the internet. Only 16 bungalows that stretched from a central lodge. I was curious to see the rooms that were described as about 150 square meters with bath and showing facilities. Lounging space with a king-sized bed area protected by a mosquito net. The first time I experienced sleeping under a mosquito net was in Barbados years ago. In those days, it just hung over the bed and needed pulling down. Of course, I was unaware of this procedure. The next morning, I had just one big mosquito bite. Funny how certain circumstances, you quickly learn to use things properly. Back to the hotel, the entrance hall and lounges were decorated to an ambiance of yesteryear. Spacious, elegant, and tasteful. The smiling staff treated me as if I had just come home after a trip up country. I had a vision of wearing riding boots, putting my feet up, and asking someone to pull them off. Before I was taken to my room, we sat down with a cup of tea. George's man, Robin, explained why I was here to take photos of butterflies for a London magazine. Before the shooting commenced, we would take 2 days to see the falls. While drinking our tea, the hotel's hostess kindly explained that to walk the length of the falls is a 2.4 miles walk with several stops to admire the view. Also to dry out from the spray and mist generated by the falls. As it was the rainy season, the falls would be near their maximum flow of 2,800 cubic meters of water per second, as opposed to 300 metric cubes in the dry season. We decided to visit on the first 2 mornings. Now to the room. As we entered, I had the feeling of being introduced to Zimbabwe under British rule. This was the state of play. Everything and everybody has their place. I walked through the room to the balcony at the far end, noticing on my way a bar full of all the drinks imaginable. I opened the glass screen windows to experience the Africa of one's dreams. It was a small valley running down to a water hole. I quickly realized the hotel was on a slight rise, protecting it from the multitude of animals slowly grazing their way to water. One could not ask for a more idyllic view. I was to spend a few hours on this balcony, just observing the animal kingdom, going about their daily lives. The room was delightful and serviced with all the facilities to make your stay a pleasing memory. I had a bizarre feeling that for the privileged, Africa must have been a very pleasant place. The next morning, heralded by a dawning sun, breakfast on the terrace with interesting choices of food. Robin drove me to see the falls. 20 minutes drive, we were in the Victoria Falls, parking after being heralded by African folks dancing at the gate. Armed with waterproof capes, we set off towards the falls. The first encounter was the noise, the next the spry, and then through the trees we saw the watershed. It is a sight so awesome, it literally took your breath away. The beauty, the palm hour, and the light and mist reflected from the cascade of water is frightening. I was inspired to write a poem in acknowledgement of its beauty. I knew a magazine in London that might be interested in publishing it. The Falls, Victoria, Zimbabwe. On the horizon, across those vast lands, I saw a wispy sight of mist raising for the earth. No apparent panic from the wildlife. A fire, it is not. The nearer I get, a rainbow arching is beauty skywards. Then I heard the rumbling sound like thunder. There, covered in spay, is a mystery and magic that unfolds. Gigantic, awesome water falls from majestic heights, falls in torrents of spectacular proportions, careers deep into the river below. The beauty of the falls is in its majestic power, a never-ending cascade of turbulent water. This power dominates your mind and soul. Torrents of water flow through your veins. You are left exhausted and on occasions wet from the spray. One feels very small experiencing nature's magnificence. The original explores never saw the falls from the air. The mighty river in its majesty is a glorious prelude before it turns into the eternal beauty of the falls. One visit is not enough for the tranquility of your spirit. The second visit, the falls were shrouded in mist and stray. Then, by the hand of God, the curtains opened, all her power and glory exposed to the naked eye. In bended knee, you threw your arms to heaven in admiration. We spent the next day at the falls. Their splendor and magic had the same force of attraction as the previous day. On our third day, Robin took me to the forest where the charakt had been sighted. There were plenty of butterflies, and I practiced catching a few. When I let them go, I enjoyed watching them fly into the magnificent trees. Robin was most amused. He told me he had spent many days with George, chasing butterflies. It was my fourth day in the forest, after spending many hours walking and watching the constant movement of these colorful creatures, that we saw the butterfly that George hungered for to complete his collection. There it was, on a branch, enjoying the evening sun. I took a deep breath, moved slowly and quietly forward. All my practicing of using the butterfly net paid off. George had provided me with a special prepare box to keep the precious creator in. That night at the hotel, we had an excellent dinner with champagne. The next morning, we left for Harare. Robin and I found with difficulty George's friend in a scheduled part of the capital. He was a taxidermist, owning a store full of the various wildlife found in Zimbabwe. Once, he saw the butterfly that George had already contacted him about. His face lit up with excitement. I never thought you would find it. Incredible. My friend George will be in seventh heaven. Later that day, I said goodbye to Rodin and gave him a handsome tip for all his kindness and help. Sitting on the long flight to London, I thought about my little adventure. 2 days as a tourist, visiting one of the world's great wonders, was like a dream. Then, a few days tramping through the forest, searching for a rare butterfly, had the thrilling flavor of the chase. Completing my mission was a very satisfying end. 3 weeks later, when picking up the morning mail, I noticed a letter from George. He told me everything was in order. There are no words to thank you. When you have a moment, come down to see us. He enclosed a handsome check for my intervention. David Nutt, December 2024. Clay Pigeons. It was 3 days since you last called. No, I should clarify, since you answered. Since you answered your damn phone and stopped breaking protocol. And it's not like you didn't know the rules. You needed to check in once every day. Not every 24 hours. Every day. Thursday before midnight, and then Friday, just as the day turned, counted as 2 check-ins. Yet you never stretched it like that. Always called at noon sharp. Another day where you were human, and in vicinity of your landline. Mark had been huffing and puffing since day 2. But I assured him this wasn't like you, that something big and horrible and terrible must have happened. Maybe you were laying prone on the floor of your living room, and I was sheltered here, wondering why you weren't calling, while I should have been the one calling for help. By day 3, I was spiraling. You were caught in a trap. You were dismembered and possibly disemboweled. You had lost all sanity and feeling. Mark warned me that 24 hours more and we would need to call in control. I snapped and informed him I was perfectly aware of that, as well as I was perfectly aware of what control would do to you. I pleaded with him to give me your address. It was against every rule in the book, but I was sure he would understand. After all, you had been so diligent with it all. We never had to ask you for anything. You always did your check-ins and checkups by yourself. The phone kept ringing. By day 4, he relented. The first thing I noticed was the curtains. They were green and closed shut. A flyer was on your porch, flapping furiously in the wind. Its pages turned, advertising deals in meat and shampoo. Your house was small, with flaying blue paint and a wraparound porch. You had plants, and their leaves were dropping in thirst. I knocked on your door twice. You had one of these old-looking knockers, leaving the smell of iron lingering in my fingernails. I don't know what I expected. A hovel, perhaps, or a burrow hole, but everything looked very human to me. Or maybe it was all an act, and you were living in the garden hut. I circled the house, looking for any signs of life, and found none. Wind chimes were swaying softly in the distance, filling the air with a clicking sound. It sounded like a clock counting down. I knew I shouldn't, and under any other circumstances, I wouldn't. But I pressed my nose to your windows, one by one, hoping for any movement or sound from within. I found myself scanning the air for the smell of your dead body. But then I stopped. Maybe I was giving you too much credit. Maybe it was all an act, and you were all the way to the border by now. Mark had given me the security key. All agency-approved houses had one, even though you never knew. It must have been horrible to know that someone could enter your house at any time. Or at least, that was what Mark had said when I asked him, and then chose not to ask anything more. The door creaked, letting in an arc of sunlight. The first thing I noticed was the mirror on the floor, shards spreading in almost a perfect diameter. The second thing I noticed was the pigeon. It flapped furiously around the couch, leaving talon marks on the fabric. The couch matched the curtains, was the first thought I had. The second one was that it was you. Veronica? I asked, and my voice trembled, because this didn't make sense. And then the pigeon talked. and it was you. Amelia! And the pigeon couldn't cry, but I swear I heard its voice break. Amelia, I can't turn back. I closed the door behind me and reached for the light switch. What do you mean you can't turn back? I can't turn back, you echoed, and flew to the mirror. Your image multiplied in each shard until 3, 4. A flock of pigeons were staring back at me. I don't know why. You paused for a second and hoped from one tiny foot to the other. I can't remember how I look like anymore. Veronica, this is nonsense, I said, because I had to stick to protocol. It was our only chance to avoid control, after all. Have you tried your memory exercises? You have been so diligent with them. The pigeon huffed. You think I don't know that? And something about it startled me to my core. There was this animal, barely reaching up to my ankle. Yet, it was you, the 40-something woman to survive the shifting experiments, turning from a mole to a lion in the blink of an eye, and then back to human again. You had survived the monitors and the testing and the labs, only to be stuck as a pigeon. This was ridiculous. I got to my knees because, frankly, it was embarrassing to have to look down to see you. Veronica, control will be here in less than 6 hours. We need to prove them you are lucid. And most of all, human. Maybe it was because you were less than a foot tall, but your voice was very small all of a sudden. I am perfectly lucid, Amelia. As for human, there was a sound that might have been a laugh. I simply don't know how to be that anymore. Don't say that, I gasped. At least don't say that out loud. There was a long silence. And then, can I trust you? I almost laughed. You could turn into a bear if you wanted. Tear me in half. I broke into your house. I have been monitoring you every single day for the past 5 years. I was trying to beat control in its own game. The wind chime kept ringing. I can help you if you want. I all but ignored your question. I had been nothing but a surveillance camera to you for half a decade. But you have to promise me that you will turn back. Help me how? I can call the agency for you. You can do the speaking. I paused for a second. This is the reason you haven't called, right? Because you don't have, limbs? You can't pick up the phone? I sounded irrational, even to my own ears. Of course, the pigeon couldn't pick up the damn landline. It had no hands. You would do that? I would. But only if you promise to turn back by nightfall. Your voice cracked. I don't know if I can promise that. I don't know how to do that. I don't remember my own face. Nonsense, I called again. I will help you remember your face just fine. And I picked up the landline. Mark was confused, but relieved. Remarked how I had worried for nothing. And maybe I hadn't reached you yet. But as soon as you show me, you had to tell me to turn back and stop being such a fool. That everything was okay. And you were fine. And everything was fine. And nothing would go wrong ever again. He sounded like a preacher promising heaven to killers. In short, a whole load of bullshit. When he finally hung up, you flew up to the curtain rod. Why would you do that? You asked. And it was a brilliant question, because I hadn't the slightest idea myself. You know what control would do to you otherwise? My voice was small. I had to look up to you now. You huffed. The collar. I know. Everyone knew. It was a terrible, horrible thing, blocking any shifting until deemed appropriate again. Stuck as a human forever. Surely not such a terrible fate, as I had been stuck as a human from the moment I was born, and would likely remain one forever. Yet, why be a human forever, when you could be a different beast every hour? Yet, why be human at all? A small voice always echoed in the back of my mind. But once again, I pushed it down. Envy was one thing, self-hatred was another. Now, let's find your face. I clapped my hands, sounding like a school teacher. This encounter had to take a pleasant turn somehow, even if I had to grab it by the reins to do so. I had never seen your face myself. To me, you were just Veronica, a first name on a paper, and occasionally a voice in my ear. You were also a string of numbers and letters, a barcode detailing you as one of the few survivors. But you didn't need to know that. Do you have any family photos? Phone backgrounds? My voice trailed in the quiet of the house. He hit me. It all went still. Excuse me? He hit me. Your voice is steadier now. He hit me, and I needed a way out. I figured I could fly, but then he shot me, and this is when I notice that every feather on the floor is laced with your blood, and the smell I had been ignoring is there. It is tangy and metallic. You laugh. It is a desperate sound, coming out more like a croak. I had never heard an animal make a sound like that. Yet here you are. I guess you could say I asked for it, turned myself into a clay pigeon, a perfect target for him to shoot at. Nonsense, I snap. Don't talk like that about yourself. You keep talking, as if I had never interrupted. It was as if a slate had been wiped clean. I had been diligent with everything. I had been walking around the minefield, tiptoeing mostly, with the agency, with the calls, with him. He wouldn't let me shift. Said it was unnatural, that it was better if I embraced my true self, which, of course, was me being human. A croak escapes your beak again. I hadn't shifted in 5 years. This is my first time flying since I met you. And do you know what is the funny thing? I had been human for so long, Yet I don't remember my own face. I was just his extension, I think. Your feathers are puffed, and you reach down, nibbling on a feather on your chest. And the worst thing is, I am afraid. I am afraid to try to shift back again, because then what happens with the gunshot? You are speaking as if I am not there, as if you are addressing an audience of thousands, giving a pragmatic lecture on anatomy. Your voice is devoid of feeling, and I have an overbearing need to reach out to you. What if it pokes open a hole on my chest? What if it cuts off an artery in my leg, and then I need to amputate it? My voice is gentle for once. Let me see, I didn't think you would. Yet you fly down and land on my arm. I draw in a sharp breath. I had always dreamed of a bird landing on me like that, ever since watching it in old animated movies. Your feathers are stained red, and when I reach for your right foot, you tremble. It's okay, I whisper. And because you are a pigeon, I reach and stroke the feathers on the top of your head. It's okay, I repeat, mostly to myself, because while I have studied animal medicine, I am surely not a human doctor. You might be lucky. It looks like nothing but a scary flesh wound. But you are right. I have no idea what this means for your human body. What is your favorite color? I ask, and you angle your head to the side. Orange, I guess. Although I never gave it much thought. You are light as a feather. Why orange? I love the sunrise. All is dark. And then there is orange. And then there is a new day. That's a lovely answer, I say, because I need to tether you back to yourself. What do you remember of your mother's eyes? And then I curse myself because you grew up in the academy. What would you know of your mother's eyes? Yet, despite everything, you answer. They were brown, I think. I talk you through your memories and your dreams. We recall your training and exercises, your memory drills and protocol compliances, who you were before and who will you be after, animal and human anatomy, femurs and phalanxes, muscles and arteries, and how your brain expands, and how your heart beats. We spend all night talking. How you are a human, but you don't have to be one. How you want to be one. How it is worth taking the risk. And then there is a flash, and you are on the floor, dried blood on your side, the woman and the beast. Professor Manda entered the lecture hall, and the entire auditorium fell silent upon noticing her presence. She tapped the floor as she walked in her blocked purple heels, which complemented her purple and green Ankara dress. Her braided hair was styled in a small bun, and she adorned her normal-sized earlobes with silver earrings. She looked the part, As she stood in front of the people, she was the wife, the mother, and the first woman professor in her town. She stood at the podium and leaned forward into the microphone. She began to speak. It is said that a woman of greatness never sleeps at night. In the light of day, she is loved and respected by all, but in the stillness of the night, she is haunted by her own shadow. She paused to pose a question. What happens when you take a woman from the land she walks on and place her in waters that could either drown her or feed her to the creatures of the sea? Taking a sip of the black coffee prepared for her at the podium, laced with a shot of Irish whiskey at her request, she savored the acquired taste and answered her own question. I'll tell you one thing that a woman I know did when she didn't drown or get eaten. She floated in the water for as long as she could. Eventually, she started to swim in search of land, even territory that did not belong to her. Her instinct to survive became desperate when she discovered a small island in the middle of nowhere. She fell asleep for a while, only to wake up to the sound of her stomach growling. Her mouth was dry from a lack of water, and her body felt heavy since she hadn't eaten for days. Despite this, one thing grew stronger: a desperate need to survive at all costs. The water around her was calm, and while her body was weak, only her eyes showed signs of movement. She dived into the water and caught a large fish by its tail. The fish struggled for freedom, but she was too quick, pulling it out of the water, depriving it of air, and sinking her teeth into its flesh. Days passed, and her life began to change as she learned to survive in the wild. During the day, she enjoyed sleeping, but when the moon rose, her eyes shone brighter because it was time to feed. All the small animals glared at her, the heartless intruder who killed them with no mercy. She fed on their uncooked flesh and stored their remains in the cool ground under the trees. The woman destroyed the homes of other creatures to build her own, cutting down trees to make a house. She had crossed the line that separates humans from animals. She had become like one of them, another creature in the world struggling to survive. The heat of the sun and the cold rain had not killed her. Her body was shaped like steel. Her muscles bulged. Her hair had grown wild, and her eyes resembled those of a mad woman. Yet, her need to survive had only grown stronger. This need had driven her out of her own humanity and transformed her into a beast. After all, who better than a beast could survive in such harsh conditions? With focus, the beast performed its tasks, replacing soft human hands with hard, strong ones. The brutal environment was suited only for a beast. Thus, She adapted to the harsh world that had transformed her body into that of the beast. One sunny day, the beast managed to push the makeshift raft into the ocean, battling against the waves as it sailed away. Looking back at the small island, the woman reclaimed what was left of her body and felt a pain in her chest. The hope she once had now returned in double amounts. Her raft sailed on the dark sea the entire night, but she was not afraid. While her vision may have been affected, her other senses were as sharp as a shaka's spear. In the morning, she could see the mainland in the distance. Hungry and tired, she thought about her favorite meal: enshima, cabbage, and dried fish. She remembered how her mother used to cook it for her, and the gentle voice that would wake her in the morning. Tears fell from her eyes as she finally felt human again. As she gazed at the mainland, she smiled and tried to scream, but her smile was crooked, and her scream was more of a whisper because the beast could neither smile nor scream. People looked at her in wonder, asking each other how the woman had managed to survive in the wild. They called her great and erected a monument in her memory. Books about her were written, and children learned of her bravery. Many years went by, but she never forgot her past because the beast's eyes would stare back at her in the mirrors of her house. She couldn't accept the fact that without the beast, she wouldn't be alive. The audience was quiet, expecting more of an explanation from the professor's strange story. Then she cleared her throat and took another sip of her coffee. As the hot liquid went down her throat, she said shakily, "Only losers drown in earthly miseries or die by becoming a beast. Sometimes, just sometimes, one has to become a nightmare in order to live in her dreams. And with that comes the consequences of that decision." There was dead silence after that. Then, after a minute, a faint clap sparked the whole crowd to applaud and finally give her a standing ovation. Professor Manda walked to a covered figure and unveiled an erected statue of her at the entrance of the auditorium. Many students flocked to her to get their copies of her latest book signed. The day felt long, and she was thankful it had finally come to an end as she entered her house at midnight. She staggered to her children's bedroom and saw that they were sleeping. The coffee had done its job, making her feel tipsy. She entered her own room and was greeted by her husband's loud snoring. As she stepped further inside, she took off her earrings and placed them on her vanity table. However, when she looked up, she suddenly screamed at the reflection staring back at her. So today's story has come to an end. Or perhaps it never really ended. There are mysteries still there, questions still unanswered, and sometimes things that seem to only exist in stories can creep into reality in unexpected ways. Are you sure that when you turn off the sound, everything around you will still be normal as before? Or is there something watching you? Either way, always remember that these are just stories, or at least we want to believe that they are. If you like moments of suspense, tension, and breathlessness, don't forget to follow me so you don't miss the next stories. And next time, when you come back, make sure you are ready, because what awaits you may be even scarier than you thought. See you again if you still have the courage to continue listening.